With the inflationary costs that we have seen, especially in fuel prices, and not necessarily, but especially there. So the model has operating costs, depending on the category, just in the operating expenses, to increase by about 3 to 5% each year through 2026, and then 3% per year thereafter. It's a model that Helen and Pam can easily adjust, change over time right here, but at this point, that seems to be where we are. No bonding, capital costs range between about 3 to 6 million a year, and we have a beginning fund balance in front of this of about 16. So on the next slide, I just want to tell you the two key metrics that we mentioned before you. Days cash on hand, and then you're not going to really be as interested in the other one, the debt service coverage ratio, but those generally are two metrics that any utility is. So we're going to focus on days cash on hand. And that's up to you. What's your policy? How much are you comfortable with having? So we'll show those using. So let's put that as a baseline scenario. If you can see those numbers, this is the baseline. This is what happens if we have no rate increases, assuming the operating costs and the capital costs that we're given. And I've got a spreadsheet in more detail if you need to. But anyway, the net revenues before debt for capital. In this case, would be the same capital cost, and you can see we're going to eat down that fund balance really pretty quickly. And so by 2025, we are short 19 days. Parentheses means the negative. It doesn't mean we're going to have 19 days test. We are short 19 days, and it just grows without rating. So what are most utilities generally? They generally run about half a year, but they're in a little different situation because of the bonding. They want about 150 to 180 days. If a utility has to bond, we start looking at rating if you go below 150 days. That's just to give you a ballpark idea. Kind of like this is a little bit different. So let's look at the options. Okay, so these are the options we looked at based on input from staff. And we would start with increases for part of the year starting in April. It's the way the model works. In 2025, we have $26, 27, 28, or 26, 26, 28, or 25, 27, 28. If you will come out the most favorably with option one, although they're really close, 3 times significant changes in to be honest, they're so close. But if you make the rate increase, and I'm not recommending it, but saying that if you make the rate increase bigger in the beginning, you get the benefit of it. Several, more years going out. Okay, so those are just the regular cans, and then under all options, the green part can is more slow, and additional, and it's 350. So let's look and see what happens. Option one. Okay, so here are the increases here, 2016, 728. And you can see that your daily platform here, we keep it positive. We're always at the, we don't get really low about 49, 48 days cash on. Still pretty low, but you may be comfortable with that. You also can start after 2027, you could keep doing it all year building up. You wanted to build that up some more. Under any of the options, you can keep increasing. A lot of our clients we've seen is doing 3% a year every year after they do an initial rate increase that they're in trouble because they feel like they can and keeping up with inflation. However you want to do that. Okay. So if you look at those numbers, you end up at 48 days. You can see where you're in the middle. Let's go to option two. Okay, you end up just a little lower because you went 26, and then instead of going to 27, you stayed at 26 for 2 years. And then you went up to 28. And so you really did it so, you did so quite a bit. And then if we go to option three, same difference. You started though with 25, and then you jumped to the 27. So pretty similar together. There's really not a lot of difference in these across the board. And I'll just let you figure any questions about them. Let's do the summary on this last slide here. Oh, good. Take this slide. Good. You can jump in on this as well. So we look at this summary here. I've explained the options so you can just see how you have a little more cash on hand with option one, as we have said, and really not much discernible difference at all in option two and option three. So if you were more comfortable only going to $25 this first year, yes, but then you bump up by $2 to the 27 instead of 26, which is the difference between option two and three. And to get you pretty much in the same place where you would have been. Those are the options that we've run. I've got the spreadsheet here, happy to answer any questions.
I don't know who this is before. What has our historical cash on hand been?
So roughly 40 at year-end cash. In 2015, the board set a policy to have a desired 20% year-end cash. And then looking at its increase when we dropped to 5%, looking future.
How does that relate to the state?
Good question, and that's something I hire people that are smarter than me.
I mean, historically.
Yeah. For 2024, but what you do, take to calculate the cash on hand, you take your operating expenses, and then how much cash on hand do you have, how many days?
Yeah.
Okay, with that number. Okay, yeah.
Roughly around 5 months, I'm gonna say, of swag. So yeah, it's a little different than, what is that, 2.5? Yeah. Now, some of the things that we as staff are looking at to try to, how do I want to say, it, increase our cash flow throughout the year because we build in the rears, right? 3 quarters, so there is that big delay. So some of the things that Helen and I have been talking about, in brainstorming a bit with staff is what if we did monthly billing? What if we did every other month to help increase our cash flow throughout the year rather than having that big delay and hoping, right? So there are things that we're looking at internally. That does drive up cost. However, I think that some of those we can just manage through the fee increases as we go.
That actually gets back to her question, Melody, to get us to where you're talking about.
The
Because,
previous board policy, that is.
yeah,
correct.
I thought what we were trying to hold about 3 months. When my recollection of that correct, you think it was 5?
I think 4 to 5 is probably roughly the 20% year in cash.
20% year in cash would be 20% of operating, like 2.4 months. This is 20% of the year, right?
I think we were looking at all expenditures, if I'm not mistaken. So for example, going forward into next year, we have 31 million of operating expenses plus 5 million of capital expenses.
Why did it go down so much between 2024 and 2025?
The capital.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Well, it's a capital outlay.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
I think that's been the kicker, right? The capital outlay is that we had 2 years of delay of drawing down cash to purchase truck.
It's been sitting there.
Yeah, it's hitting. And then the fact that prices went up as much as they did, of over $100,000 per truck. And so we locked in at the most 8 side load trucks, right? So that would be another consideration. Can we make that 7 going forward? Understanding we still have 18 trucks that increase the maintenance cost. So the other thing that's happened this year that we haven't experienced for 2 years is that turnover. New trucks coming in, old trucks going out. We have an increase of, and I think I presented that to you last month. We had, instead of 56 side load trucks that were being maintained, we had 66 because we had 10 that were exiting or getting prepared to leave and new coming in. But there is a delay in that new truck going online and going out on route of 30 days. So these are things that we need to consider going forward and plan for, right? Need to plan for.
Is that part of the estimate when we bring on a new truck or, because as the getting cost, or is that something that comes out the gym?
Yeah, that would come out of the maintenance line item. And so we did, as you saw, and we'll go through, you've seen that maintenance cost go up
That's a lot.
significantly. Yeah,
Okay, that makes sense.
significantly. So it's not just the rate we're being charged, it's the truck, number of trucks that are in service and coming in and going out. Yeah.
Right, someone needs to come in and having about 3 minutes, that's something done. We can get there with option one, instead of going to 26 and $7.28 increase each year. We went to 26, I got the model here, we did $1.50, 27.50, and then 29. That will get you to 93 days. Just for discussion.
Okay, so 26.50, 27.50, and then 29.
26, you can hold there and then do $1.50 after that, 27.50, and then 29.
Makes so much sense.
Yeah, it seems like we need to dig in a little bit more and start.
I mean, if that's the level that we need to be at, then let's just do that. I mean, if that's, I can't speak to whether or not that's the level we need to be at, but if that's the case, that's what people are saying is the case, then let's just do it.
And it all depends on your assumptions, you know, the operating costs and your own. But if you get down to long numbers, if you're somebody, you know, when you're at that, what, 40 days, 30-something days, that's and these numbers, they're not perfect, you know, we don't know inflation, but, well,
I don't,
you know.
I mean, got 39, I just, that's not smart.
Again, question for you, are we just looking at a 3-year increase? This isn't anything that would continue for perpetuity, it's just over correct?
That's what this is based on.
Okay.
But with those assumptions, it will continue. Because if you're gonna have to increase 3% every year, your assumption is that every year you have a rate
I
increase.
guess my bigger question is that be a vote of the board, that's nothing automatic.
It's a policy, yeah, that would be.
But we
Just want to make sure.
We have to vote every year, or we can vote for the next 3 years.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So when Rachel dug in to look at that, and she's not here, she needed to be excused because she's out of town. But when she looked at, the rate increases, and you can adopt in the future, but every year you're gonna still have to have a tentative adoption of the tentative budget and hold a public hearing always, right? So that's always there.
The same as like finding a future board,
Yeah.
future council kind of thing, they have to look at
They
it.
have an
Vote
option.
on it every time.
Vote on.
Dan, I do have a question. Most of these these options that were presented are strictly based upon fee increases.
Right.
There's no discussion, well, the memorandum had discussion of leasing
Correct.
and or bonding. And I don't see I didn't see any information about if you did a typical bond, what the dollar amount you need, what the maturity would be on that bond, because as you know, the MSD did and bonded, it was a very small cost
Okay,
based upon the dollars that we collected.
okay.
And so that bond that went out was purchased by one group, one individual, so to speak. So they get their guaranteed rate of return, but that put that cash in, and as we see future costs of vehicles, and we capture that cost, look at a bond versus lease, and that you have the cash on hand, which is going to, again, as you draw down on it in the purchases.
So I think that's a perfect segue,
Yeah.
if I may, into Japheth, who was able to join us. Japheth, are you there?
I'm here. I think the link that I had, the link in the email was different than the link in the agenda. So, yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about my memo. I don't know if you want me to pull that up, share it, but I think Susie's giving you a really great. Oh,
Sorry,
perfect.
Japheth, we can, there you go.
Okay.
Jacob, did I you off from being here? Because I was just kidding you last time that not paying your rent. You could have came.
No, you're all good. Sorry. I just I teach a class down at BYU Mondays, and so it's easier for me if I at 11 o'clock, so it's easier for me. So I appreciate you guys letting me join remotely.
Okay,
So,
that's
so here we go. So this is just an introduction into a few things. So I've got that kind of baseline scenario that Susie has talked a little bit about. I used it as a baseline where you do you do rate increases in 25 and in 27. And I think the 27 increase was up to 28 and the 25 was to 26 in the scenario here. And basically said, what does that look like for your cash position? And then took your cash position and kind of explained a little bit about how a rating agency would look at this. And importantly, from the different rating agencies' perspective, your top rated, AAA rated districts, utility type districts, are going to have 150 days cash on hand. So a little bit less than 6 months worth of operating expenditures cash on hand. The reasoning for this is basically just, so you can have operating cash if you have something come up, a few expenditures that are emergency. The example I use a lot is Payson City 3 or 4 years ago had an emergency come up where they had to replace uh, a water main. And it came up, they had a burst, and it really caused some significant issues. They needed about $3 million of just operating cash that they had to sock away towards that, while it took us 6 months to get a bond, or not 6 months, 6 weeks to get a bond in place for them. And so, that operating cash can get you through kind of emergency situations. And it depends on what your organization looks like, the level of cash. And it sounds like you have a policy of 20% as kind of the maximum range, 5% for the bottom range for that. But I thought it'd be helpful to give you what kind of the rating agencies use as their metrics. 150 days cash on hand, or in some cases 90 days cash on hand for a more for not the AAA top rating, but for something a little bit still strong, but not all the way up there. And now, one way to make your cash go further is this idea of utilizing debt financing. And so I provided some debt financing options. And I'll say kind of quickly that bonding is an option that usually there's not really much of a difference when I'm talking about bonding and leasing. They're functionally the same. There's some statutory requirements that are a little bit different, but in both cases, you're issuing a debt instrument. You then purchase your assets and you own them. They're, in the case of a bond, you'd have a lien on your revenues. In the case of a lease, you'd have a lien on the property, the equipment. And that's really the difference. They're functionally the same. Now, a bond, you're going to have to have a bond attorney come in and do work on that. That's an additional cost on that. And for vehicles and rolling stock, it's pretty uncommon to have bonds be the security for that type of financing. It's much more common to have, just a lease purchase is what we refer to it as. So a lease purchase is just a situation where you go into a single financer, usually a large bank like Bank of America. If Rachel were here, she could tell you that they've done over at Unified Fire, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo, Capital One. These large banking organizations do these capital type leases. The benefit of these capital leases is it allows you to basically spread the financing over a number of years. But realistically, investors don't want to have a financing out on an asset longer than the life of the asset. And so if you have a replacement cycle of 7 years and that vehicle becomes, functionally useless, not really, but you've depreciated the value to zero at that point, then an investor's not going to want to take a financing beyond the point where that has any value to you. because then it has no value to them as well, right? As a collateral piece. And so as a function of the financings, we really wouldn't take these beyond 7 years. And so why that matters is because, because you have such a short funding cycle on your pieces of, your equipment here, you're matching exactly your payments with the useful life of the vehicle. In a city where you have, or at the county where you have big buildings that could last for 40, 50 years, if you finance that over 20 years, you still have 30 years potentially where you're not paying on that asset, where you're getting use for it. But here in this case, you don't get that benefit, and realistically, because you're matching up the useful life of the building with the term of the financing, you're going to have to, over time, make each of your payments line up with that effectively. And so if you finance every year, after 7 years, you're back to the exact same payment amount, or you're paying for effectively the same thing, but now you've got interest costs on top of that. So for short-term assets with short useful lives, it doesn't really make a ton of sense to consistently use debt to refinance them unless you have residual value at the end. And this is something we talked with your staff about, is you do tend to sell these vehicles at the end of their useful life and get a little bit out of that. So one thing we could potentially do to get you a little bit more value is just say, okay, we're only going to finance and pay principal on the portion that you don't think you can get, or that you are using, up to the amount that you can sell it for. So then at the end of the term, you're paying off the lease with the value of those vehicles. We've seen a lot of cities do that and get bitten in the, we'll just say, recently by that practice, where, the values aren't the same. And so they have to come up with the difference when they go to sell those. And so that could be a cash cost, because you have to estimate the value of something 7 years from now. So that's a long way to basically say debt financing is really not a good long-term solution for making your cash go farther for vehicles like you do at the Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling District. But it can be a good short-term measure to increase cash levels and allow you time to increase rates to levels that put you on a more sustainable footing long-term. And that's what these different scenarios have modeled, is what a debt financing in 25 for your capital needs amortized over a number of years. I think I did 5 years in both of these scenarios rather than 7. We could extend it 7 if we wanted to. It gives you more of a runway, but it shows you what it does to your cash position by doing these financings. If you do, your 2025 capital needs, and you say, okay, this will get us through this year without having to do paying cash for this, and we'll build up a slightly larger cash balance, that could get you almost to 150 days, which is that kind of threshold that the rating agencies say is really your AAA rated entities. So that 150 days, you're almost there by doing a single financing in 25. But, over time, you decline in your cash values. So you could use a combination of debt financing and rate increases to get you onto a more sustainable footing for the long term. That's kind of, I think, my conclusion here, is that I wouldn't really suggest that doing debt financing long term is a viable solution for someone whose assets are so short term, because debt financing is a long term instrument. But it can be something that helps you ease into rate increases for your residents.
I can deduct it.
And then Sherry,
Couple things. Do we know when our next big bond would have to be here? What are our big things that we would actually have to bond for building, larger things that are not 7 years long term?
The only property that we actually own is a truck barn and then land that's just to the north.
You don't need a bond for land. We
Yeah.
have that.
But
The truck barn itself then,
It's all depreciated, it's fully depreciated.
okay?
I
Where
don't
we
know.
are
But
at
it needs
the,
to be rebuilt at some point. It's
At
old.
some point, yeah, it would be nice to have our own admin building over there and maybe bond for something like that, for that space, but I think that's long-term view and maybe future planning, for right now, and what do we do now? Does
and the
that
reason why,
answer the question?
kind of, and the reason why I'm asking this question is, as far as policy, if we're gonna bond for something large down the road, which at some point we will probably want to do that.
Okay,
But if we're gonna do that, we want to be at a AAA rating when we get to that point. Then you want 150 days of cash on hand. And I don't know how many years you have to have that to be able to keep that AAA rating. But if we're not going to be bonding anytime soon, less cash on hand doesn't matter because we're not bonding, if that makes sense. So this is where the policy comes in, and we got to determine how soon do we think we're going to need a long-term bond as this organization? What does that look like, and when do we think that will have to hit? And make sure that we're planning ahead to have that AAA rating by the time we go into that, because you do not want to be paying high interest rates, right? You want to be able to bring your rating up to that. We want to be able to make sure we have 150 days to be able to keep that rating. And so we'll want to do that for a couple of years beforehand, which means we've got to be thinking ahead in what we do as far as management of our fund balances during that time. So I want to make sure that we're aware of what our goals are long-term that way and what we need to build and rebuild. Right now, we're leasing this building. That makes it easy. The only building we look like we would need to rebuild, and probably sooner than later, it sounds like, is that truck barn, correct?
yeah, depending on the purpose, right? So the way it's being utilized now, it works. How long will it work? I don't know. We would have to have experts come in and look at that structure. And
What
get
kind
it-
of maintenance does it take right now? I'm just curious.
Right now, it's pretty low. We did
Okay.
upgrade the fire suppression system in there, as you know, and spent just over 40, can't remember, but that was a shared cost, or our cost was actually pretty minimal. So I don't know if that answers your question, but there are some upgrades or improvements that may have.
And roofing, where are we at on that? How many
I
years?
mean,
has it been?
when was it built? I mean, it's really old.
I'm gonna guess late 1960s, early 70s.
So I think it's less about what it needs for current use and more about what it could be used for.
Correct.
Okay.
It's a bigger.
Correct.
So I think that's a discussion we really need to have on that, because if we're not taking that into consideration, these decisions now, we're not having the whole conversation.
Yeah, and I think there is a whole conversation of what does each board member view as long-term for this organization? And I think, board member Horn had some questions, but before we move to that, I think one is, try to get a sense for every board member and what your interests are for your respective city. Because some cities are understanding this need for a fee increase and others are not. And I think that needs to be stated openly in the meeting so that you all understand where each.
And that's why I think that this conversation would be part of that. I mean, trucks are short-term capital. They're 7 years. We know that they're, and leasing when we can actually use it and run a fee on that doesn't make sense to me. Bonding doesn't make sense to me. Paying interest on that. I'd rather be upfront on that, because really what you do when you're looking at that, either we lease and we put money away for the next one, right, as we're doing it. There's some upfront costs of that, or we're always a little bit behind, or we cover the cost up front. Either way, we're going to end up paying for it one way or the other. So are we willing to pay for it now, or are we going to pay a little bit more later? So that's really what it comes down to when we start looking at this. the only time you can really cut back or cut services is when we say, we no longer want to do this much service, right? So if we want to keep our service at the level it is right now and how we're doing it, then the increases are there, right? Now, if we don't want to do that, we want to change services, then that's when we start talking about, we're going to cut services and then we're going to go to here. So I want to make sure it's clear we're talking about the fees are to keep service at the level we are now.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you for stating that.
And then, and if we're not going to increase those fees, then we're actually going to cost ourselves some money down the road. So the jump is bigger, right? Which is what we oftentimes do, but we're also putting us in a bond situation. If we need to bond down the road for larger capital expenses and things like that, then that's another issue, right? So those are all things that I kind of, I have to balance when I'm thinking about this in a special district, right?
Thank you. Sherry? Well, I was just thinking, we've had that conversation a little bit about the land we own, about instead of continuing to lease from the county, this building, just building our own and doing that on our own property. That would be absolutely a bigger discussion.
Yeah, I agree.
Getting out of the county situation and just building our own property and things like that. So that's we're thinking. I just have a question on assumptions on this model one financing. Is it assuming the rate increases as is it having assumed rate increases in this added into this, or is this just simply leasing?
Just the, oh, sorry, are you talking about my model or the two scenarios here, or just Susie's general model?
No, your scenario, the one that says model one leasing
Yeah.
financing and 25 model two. Are you assuming
Yeah.
it increases enough?
Just in 25 and 27, up to 26 and then $28. So in those years, those are the only increases that I'm assuming in there. After 27, no increases are assumed. So that's kind of my point, that if you want to stretch the financing out to 7 years, then you can build in some additional rate increases to keep your cash levels high. And that would be kind of the scenario I would say is valuable to use lease financing.
So on model one, lease financing in 2025. So that's assuming we do it, what was it, a $5.50 rate increase and lease the truck, get this to 142 days cash on hand. Is that correct?
Yep, it's
Jake-
just the capital cost from 25. And then the second model is the capital cost from 25 go into a lease. And then we do another lease in 26 that gets your capital costs from 26 put into it.
In
That's why
in addition to the rate increase, correct?
Correct.
So leasing and doing the rate increase gets us to these numbers, right?
Correct.
Jacob, could you clarify which option this includes? Is it not option 2, which would be the $650 a month increase in
Yeah,
25?
thank you. I just can't.
To go to
It's not on this.
$26, yeah. Yeah, so I believe you're looking at this based on option number 2, that's on page 49.
This is option 2 scenario with, and then leasing capital, right? This is option 2.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes, correct. Yeah, 26, getting up to $26 per can in 25, and then going to $28 in 27.
Okay, thank you.
And just restate, if we stick with just the rate increases, according to this, we would only still be up to 52 days cash on hand.
With no lease option.
But with a lease option, we can come up to 140 something days. 142 days. If we,
There you go.
do we need 142 days if we're not going to bond?
And that's back to
That was my question.
right? That's the question, back to what she was asking earlier too, is like, we were between 20 and 5%, which is a pretty big gap, right?
Yeah.
So what is a realistic shift? In my mind, I always thought we tried to stay around 3 months. Sorry, I wrote 4 to 5 up. I was incorrect on that.
I always, Sherry, just to clarify, I think when I came on board, we talked 90 days.
That's what I thought.
Okay.
So,
I
but,
don't know.
so, so 90 days, you know, so we're not close to that. We're half of that. In reality, so.
It seems to me that we're talking about the rate increase, but then we're talking about the bonding. And the bonding, I don't feel like we have enough information yet
Yeah.
to make that decision because we don't know, is this like a 5-year plan situation, a 10-year plan situation? We need to really look and see what the long-term goals of that would be. But today I thought we're just talking about the rate increase. I mean, I think we need to continue the bonding discussion later once we have more information, but today it just seems that we need to focus on the rate increase.
Yes, and I think with the lease option, that gives you, the idea was to give you some options.
Yeah.
The board to say, well, that is a big rate increase of going right to $26 a month, going up $6.50. It's a big one even going to $25 a month at $5.50. It's the largest increase we've ever asked for and ever raised. And then we get more into the program cost accounting and staff's report. Hindsight's always 20/20. We waited too long. 5 years was way too long to wait for a rate increase, especially with everything that was hitting us and the inflation, right? And then the $250 a month that we raised in 2023 was not enough. We knew we needed $350, but staff and the board said, let's go $250, and we were hoping that it would go longer than 2 years, but it did not. And now we're behind the 8 ball, so to speak, and that's why it is such a larger jump. If that helps at all.
Yeah, but the option 1 just makes the most sense, because it's always, we just need to do, I mean, it's not great, it is our biggest increase, but it puts us in a better position long-term, and then we can look at bonding issues.
And I'm gonna throw something out. One of the things that we talk about when we look at, there's 2 theories of raising fees or taxes, right? And that's the nibbles versus bites, right? Do you nibble at it every year so that you're not having these giant increases? Or do you wait several years and you take a big bite out of it? Either way, you're increasing because you are always gonna have to increase because inflation never goes down. We never have seen in my lifetime that I can think of inflation ever go down. So everything is always going up, and because of that, you've got to determine if you want services the same, it's either a nibble or a bite. That's just how government works. And anybody who thinks that they can come in and never raise taxes, never raise fees is an idiot. Sorry. I was gonna be blunt. You know what I mean? That's just how you have to make that up or you have to.
You really-
Really feel.
I'm just.
Yeah, that's what it comes down, Sherry, because it's that nibbles versus bites, and I understand, maybe we don't feel like we need it, or we want to change our services. That's when you get into, all right, then maybe we don't need all the services we're giving.
Sherry, that's exactly where I was going. I don't disagree. Our mission is to provide sustainable, quality, integrated waste and recycling collection services for the health and safety of our community because our thing best they can. So that's our mission. Our job is to pick up people's trash, right? And to make healthy, safe communities, right? And so do we have, probably that word, do we have a lot of fluff because we like those services and people like those? And are we in an economy where we have to scale back a little on fluff because people can't afford it?
But look at the program, what?
Well,
We have a document.
I guess-
Taylor.
I guess my concern is, that- and I'm not suggesting that any of these are not great services. They all are, right? It's not like extra whipped cream. They are great services, but how much do they cost? And we talked about this at the last meeting. How much are they truly costing us? How much is I don't know, Christmas trees or any of those things? How much is the cost associated with that to the value that we're actually providing? And can we scale back a little bit?
Or do we need to up the cost coverage?
Exactly. How those type of things, are we subsidizing so much in these other things that we're not covering our costs well enough? And who gets out of certain things? I don't know.
and I hear some folks either coming on or leaving, so I want to make sure who's still here with us. Did Tom Cyrus leave? No, he's here. Okay, great. Okay. Deborah, okay, good. Thank you.
Let's look at some of those piece pan if we can.
Sure. Are we ready to move to the staff report then? Do you have other questions? I don't do these, you could probably stick around a little bit longer, Jason, we'll need to jump off in about 45 minutes.
Do we have anything else for
Throw one
Ryan?
more thing out, because one person's block is another person's need based on values, right?
For sure.
And so, that's it.
Absolutely.
I hear it all the time, with county services, right? And so we have to determine what's in the best interest of our community where we serve, right? Out where I'm out in the west side, they just want you to come pick the dang thing up, right? Please pick it up and take all of the extra stuff with it, that's kind of how we see it. And to be honest, half our people, I don't know that they care where it goes. If it's recycle or if it's just going to the landfill at this point, they just need it gone. And because there's a lot of hoarders out in our area, we want that gone too, right? So there's a lot of that going on, and we're seeing a lot of that getting cleaned up. But you're going to find in other areas, recycling, that glass recycling, the green waste pickup, and all those programs are so important to them, right? Because they have that crunch, they really want it, and that may not necessarily be the case. I cover all the counties, so I it's different. Each of you have a very specific community. So I'm looking at my unincorporated areas of different places. It's really, really deep into
I think those are really important issues to cover as far as exactly what do we want to provide for services that we're working. I think today we really want to focus on the summary and what option we need to go to in order to keep it sustained, funding sustained. So I want to have that discussion, and they've broken out, Pam has broken out the cost to those different programs. And if you want to move on with that.
Thank you. Jacob, you'll stay on, and Susie, just in case, anybody has to go. Oh, board member Pignon has a question.
Yeah, I need to jump off here in a minute, but I just wanted to express my support for option one. I would rather see the district have enough cash to be in a healthy position. I do appreciate and I do think that the leasing option for the equipment is the better way to go. And so I'm in favor of that as well. I won't be able to stick around much longer for this meeting, but I just wanted to express my concern that, or support of option one as a way to get us into the right place. So thank you very much. And keeping the level of service that we have is very important. So that's on behalf of Immigration Canyon. Thank you.
Thank you, board member Pignon. Sorry, I forgot you needed to jump off, but thank you.
Okay, Pam?
Okay, so the page that you see before you is looking at cost. The last board meeting you wanted to see cost. We looked at 2023, which I understand is hindsight, right? But it's a full year that we could look and try to determine what are the costs for each service. In looking at trailers, just to understand, it's all rolled up into the lease. The Christmas tree is all rolled up into trailers. So we had to take some time and pull that out. I want to thank David Icke and Helen and Matt for really diving into this, especially David Icke, who spent a lot of time and has many spreadsheets that he is a master of, no question. So at bottom line, here you have it. So looking at the cost for each program, understanding garbage collections, recycling collections. This is, we look at where are we allocating people, and then where is the admin overhead. So everything is included in here. In admin and overhead for the. Oh, thank goodness. I didn't realize that. So, in looking at admin and overhead, Helen, do you want to describe that methodology? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but as far as how you break that out for the program.
Yeah, I think David actually is the one who broke out the overhead and distributed it. But I believe that what he did is he took the budget for each program and got a percentage based on that and on the overhead cost, to the proration of the overhead cost, and assigned those to the program based on that. That's what he did.
Should well.
All right, there we go. There's the methodology. Thank you very much. And in the past, that's how we had done it as well. And so getting back on track with looking at program cost accounting, which really, we started doing the deep dive this year, looking at it, so we could tell the story to you as a board. You can see that, and want to first talk about, before I jump into the program, let's talk about revenue for just a moment. That 22 million, that includes the base fee, the 1950 per home per month. It also includes second can fee, because we do charge for second service. So that's included in there. And I'm gonna go off the top of my head and recall about 8,000 second cans out there, roughly 8 to 9,000. So that's included. Going into next year's fee increase and scenarios, I put in there that we are not raising that second can fee. I know there's been concern about, larger families and can they really afford? So it would be, not included. That would stay at 1950 and then whatever the state fee goes up to, all right? So I just wanted to explain what that is. And looking at garbage collections, it's 11.6. Recycling is almost 8. Scrap is 1.1. This is in 2023. Cans is 1 million, understanding that can purchases are in there as well. So we do purchase quite a number of side load cans, and then we also have front load that are included. Keeping in mind that front load cans are also for the canyon area, so there is some residential use of that. We also have city halls that use those, and you charge for that service. County facilities, libraries, example, recreation centers, we have separate contracts to charge for those services, and we will be increasing those rates going
Line
forward.
item is that?
Talking about can
Okay.
purchases, so right underneath the scrap. Can
19
Gotcha,
revenue.
gotcha.
So the revenue for that is new build. There is a portion of that. We do charge $70 per can, so $140 for a new home coming online. They pay for the price of that can. That particular fee came about in 2017, and it was spearheaded by Sherry's predecessor, Tishner, sorry, former board member Tishner, who saw that most of the growth was coming from Harriman, and he thought we're, building that cost for the district. So the other piece of that is second can. So when people call in, they want to have a second can, we do charge for that. And then the glass can is a smaller fee, but it is included. And then I believe green is also in there. So looking at trailers, that's the trailer rental. There is a portion of this that is also, if you want to call it a free trailer or a trailer reservation for our canyon residents. So Valley residents get scrapped, and in 2023, that was a $1.1 million cost. The canyon residents receive our trailer reservation, and we have not been able to drill that down, but I could eventually give you that dollar amount. But it would be, obviously not a huge part of that 600,000. And then you have leaves, and that's happening right now. Go by 1300 East and 45th to see the ballpark, and right now it's manageable, and I anticipate eventually we will have larger piles of not just leaves. And then we have the Christmas tree, which is curbside, and that is a 26,000 a year. So all of these came about because the public will, right, and political will. The whole idea was to capture those reusable materials such as recycling. The green and the glass is obviously a separate fee, but that's how those came about. Landfill vouchers, that cost is actually rolled up into tipping fees. And through the QR code, we've actually been able, I'm going to pull up an email, that's what I'm on my phone for, I apologize. That Yale Johnson, who and Renee have been spearheading the QR code for landfill vouchers. It has driven the cost down for the use of landfill vouchers. Is that a good thing or not? But just to understand, landfill vouchers, the trailer rental, the scrap program are all because of extra stuff that won't fit in the can, and it's big and bulky, and it can't be part of that.
Do we subsidize trailer rental? Not for the canyons, but the valley?
Trailer rental, yeah, so if you look at the trailer rental, I apologize, board member
Substantially,
Jaber is
500,
showing-
500, that's a lot.
Yeah,
So parking
50
wonders,
cents.
you know, my neighborhood. How much did you say, sorry?
50 cents per home per month, subsidy, if you want to call it that, the monthly fee. So the 1950, 50 cents.
So I was just, you know, our area gets the scrap. Now I know there was discussions, not everyone, you know, there's a big fight at midnight to get these things, but for the most part, most people got it. I think the question is if they want a trailer outside of that, should we be reducing that price or not? Or should it just be at cost?
For trailer?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. So with this discussion and looking at trailers and with the discussion last month, we went in and we have looked at trailer fees and looking at increasing that. So understanding the trailer for a bulk trailer, it's $190, it's off there to the right, $190 per trailer. That includes 2 tons of waste. Well, 2 tons of waste can be anywhere from $29 if that goes to the landfill to the northwest, $41 a ton to the southwest, and then $37 for the majority, right? So looking at, can we cover some of that tonnage? without
Can we
totally-
guide them to a certain?
I'm price and proximity, it just depends. That's
Yeah, it
Southwest
depends
is
on
our-
where they-
They're the ones taking it, not us. So it's not
Yeah.
price and proximity for us that way. And if we're guiding them to a place where they're dumping it, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, so there could be a variable. So here's the tricky part. So it's easier to raise the base fee for trailers than for our staff to go back and bill.
Amen.
So we're pretty lean, and I think you know, we are lean on staff and customer service is lean. They also help with billing. So this would be an additional, they already go back and bill for anything that's over 2 tons, which is a smaller number than if we all of a sudden start billing for and look at tonnage. So trying to look at, you know, increasing that base fee. So going into 5 now. Looking at increasing that, I believe I bumped it to 240 per trailer.
What's the cost per trailer?
So the cost is, if you look at trailer 661, so 662,000. I'd have to go back and look at the number rented. I apologize, I don't have it off the top of my head.
Isn't that the 1071?
Oh, thank you, there it is, thank you. I do have it off the top of my head. So if you did a quick calculation, Mark,
$618 per trailer load.
845, 226.
So what was that?
It's really 845, well, trailer would be 206.
I see what you're saying. Oh,
I mean,
I also have a question, how many of those are, you mentioned because the canyons don't get scrapped, how much of this $514,000 is canyon scrapped?
not broken out yet.
yeah, I don't have that broken out. We just basically take the number that were
Yeah.
reserved and then pull it out of that.
So, sorry, I don't mean to make you guess, but would you guess a large percentage of it or a small percentage?
Smaller.
Okay.
I mean, if it were me, I think it's reasonable to say, if the cost was that high, if they were to at least get 50%, that the district is covering half of the cost. Because this is not a necessary, I don't look at this as a complete essential service. I think it's nice to have, and I think it's helpful, especially for those people that cannot get scrapped and people that are in those scenarios that need that flexibility. But I mean, yeah, it might still be $400 something, but if the district legitimately is going to pay for half of your cost, I don't think that's unreasonable. That'd obviously be a decent increase to the trailer, but if people don't use it and people are using less and less, it's not costing the district money if those trailers aren't going out necessarily as frequently.
I want to just, if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Keep it on.
I want to address this issue.
Okay.
I'm not sure that Woodward should be subsidizing people to clean up to this level. I think that there is a place where there are private sectors who can be cleaning up areas. And I'm not sure my neighbor should subsidize someone else's trash when they could call an independent company that's for profit to come out and pick it up. And I don't think it's the job of government entities to compete with those independent businesses, especially at this level. And I would rather just see, and I know in Taylorsville, for those people that really cannot afford anything else, the city does have a way to help them out with the trailers and the trash and the dumping fees. And that, for me, as a Taylorsville resident, is it's a more sound way to provide a service so that it gets exactly to the people who absolutely need it, absolutely cannot afford, rather than everybody supporting something that could be turned over to a private entity. 100%.
I think that's a really good point. So you're just saying, get rid of the trailer service altogether?
I'm not, I'm saying bill people for what it's.
Okay. I think the only exception to that would be we're about to don't get scrap service. I think you're still gonna
Yeah,
need to
that-
provide a service for that, right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna have to maybe look at a different, yeah, the canyons are gonna need to have, maybe you have vouchers for canyon people that the city puts out.
Yeah, I think we need to think outside the box for those entities.
I am gonna throw something out that
Wait, hold on.
Okay, sorry. I think this is a really good discussion, but ultimately, I don't think when you look at those numbers, that's ultimately gonna affect whether or not we need to raise rates. Because this, I mean, it's a very small percentage of our overall budget, and it's worth the discussion. I think that we always wanna look at how we can be more cost effective, but maybe somebody can tell me, like, if we.
It could be $500,000 though.
It's 2.2, it's 2.2%. How much would that affect? Because of looking at.
I think we're all probably on an agreement of, I think just the sense that I'm getting that we all know that there needs to be this increase.
Yeah.
But I think we're trying to also be smart, and then just the questions are being asked. You need to prepare for a bond. How are this going to be in perpetuity? How can we also cut in other places to also be smarter so that these increases are going a little bit further and not just this, the one thing we all sit on multiple boards, and the hard thing with this job is an increase here and an increase here and an increase here. And so, if you can save $500,000, I snag that
Every year.
Oh, like I said, I'm
I think
supportive
that's
of it. I'm just saying,
substantial.
we have to get the budget approved and like, I'm just talking about the timing of these discussions. I absolutely
For
think
sure.
we need to be having them. But I just think we need more information to continue, like what will be the ultimate benefit of not subsidizing the trailer program anymore, and then looking at bonding in the future. But we have a couple of weeks before we have to get this budget in.
It's a week from today.
So it's a week from today. So like, I feel like we need to put these on the agenda so we make sure they're addressed, but maybe less.
Thank you. I appreciate what you're saying, is let's wrap it up as far as what we want to do for 2025 budget or the proposed budget for the next couple of years. And we did ask Pam to bring all this information as a board. We have asked her to bring this information, and maybe we can continue these discussions at a future meeting. Sharon?
I would just want to add my voice of thanking you for bringing this. And it's, like I said, I don't know for sure how much Christmas trees are costing us. I don't know how much for sure leaves are costing us. Those kind of things. If I'm going to have to make decisions on that, I have to be accountable to people who elected me and say, okay, here's why these have to go, and here's what it costs us. And I just needed to make sure that we understood all this.
Oh, for sure.
I made any out on a very substantial rate increase because it's only one of a gazillion others to get people.
Yeah,
I
thank
agree,
you.
and I apologize for the timing, and I do want to say I'm sorry we're in this.
No apologies.
No apologies.
But to bring this information to us.
Yeah,
Perfect.
but yeah, but this is helpful.
I mean, the trailer rental revenue is less than 1%, 29%, if that helps.
So and understand what you're talking about, the policy decision, and I respect it, and I will take it forward. And I understand policy, decisions and policies change over time. So in the past, the thought was, I'm okay to pay 50 cents a month or whatever it was in the past to be able to have that availability of a trailer if I need it. You talked about having cities pay that cost. Well, our we're gonna have a subsidy still for municipalities that need to have the dilapidated property cleaned up, because we do get those requests. Taylorsville, Kern,
Yeah.
Kern has been, funding, I think, one particular property, almost 4 trailers, if I'm not mistaken, I might have lost count. So, you know, and Mayor Bush has talked about that price. And we're willing to put it up to what it costs, but I just want to make sure you understand the implications of policy change.
But we have
It is
made that
for-
to 4 cities, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, for, it's another public entity, right?
and if trailer does go up to the 240, 250, to help to offset that subsidy, whatever that may be, then the cities would bear that as well.
If I may, I think it would be very helpful too, to understand what these trailers competitively compare to those private sector ones, because we might be subsidizing it way more than we need to. Or if someone were to have to pay the actual cost, maybe it's still significantly cheaper than going with one of those private companies. I'm of the thought that I'm okay paying some of the subsidy if it helps people be able to utilize that more often. Because it's not necessarily that you all are the only ones that use it, but the opportunity is there. And that's what you're paying for. So could it be less of the subsidy? Sure. But, you know, comparing that to if I go and call some private company to come out and get a trailer ton for ton, what am I looking at competitively?
Would you be willing to send us that comparison? Just, I think we'd all be interested to do that comparison for that compared to the open market.
Okay, so I want to go back to Emily's point, is that today we really have to deal with the budget that's before us. And perhaps that we can, since we're not voting on this, am I correct? We're just taking input and direction? Yeah.
Correct, so that we can go back and prepare the tentative budget for tentative adoption next week.
That's right. So, and I would love to continue discussion on each one of these things, and I'd love to get some feedback from my compadres in Taylorsville, the other city council members, and get their feel. And I would love to continue these conversations. Please bring your ideas back. I think it might do a little survey myself in some of these private collectors. Funny thing, I was on a meeting with Tam and Greg, and my private collector came, and this crashing of a can, and you guys can't hear me. I went out and Tam was stuck in the truck, and it was, anyway, just a funny anecdote to end this.
And that was at your business.
That was my business, yeah, so it was fun.
Cool.
Okay, I'm gonna wrap that part up, the discussion about these issues. Any more discussion or comments about their budget?
Can I have for one request?
You bet.
If you could bring us back what the full cost of the trailer is, for the rental, and show that what that fee would be, and to actually have full cost of it. That would be helpful.
And I know, yes, I will. Board member Sudbury needs to leave. I was hoping that you would weigh in
Yeah,
before you.
I got more to read stuff going on, sorry.
Okay.
Thanks, Nick.
Um,
I'll give you a call. Can I give you a call?
okay. So I don't want to speak for him, but I will say that, I spoke with him on the phone last Thursday to make sure he could be here this week, because he's missed some crucial meetings to get the information of why we're raising rates. So I do know that the city does intend to go out for bid to see about providing services through private. Totally understand, and that's what I told him. And so,
Every concern is just the increase in cost.
yeah, the $5.50, $5.50, whatever we land on, is because it's the highest amount we've done. There's a sense that we've curved back services with the change to scrap. And there is no doubt that we did save money by changing that service, but it was out of desperate need by not being able to get CDL drivers. When we get more into the cost increases, I will explain more about wages and salary, or wages and overtime as we've gone up. But before I do, I just want to make sure that everyone understands in 2023, it was close to a break even, quote unquote, because one of the big reasons is we had budgeted $5.3 million to purchase trucks, and we did
didn't
not,
use it.
we couldn't. So we actually, quote unquote, saved money, if you would. Obviously that 250 increase would have been eaten up significantly. So I just wanted to point that out. Going forward into the next page, if you would, Renee, looking at cost increase over time, because I wanted to make sure I showed this illustration to you that includes the proposed, possibly tentative 2025 budget, right? And the cost increases over time. I've pointed out that, all of this is close to $6 million increase over 6 years. And which is basically $6 per home per month, right? Which is what we're talking about. And then looking future. So wages are the highest increase, and I really want to thank, Harriman City Council Member Henderson, who asked the question, well, your wages and overtime has gone up past inflation. It's like, yep, you're right. So I wanted to make sure I clearly state, and this will be part of the discussion for cities as I go forward, is that through this time, we have added 10 full-time FTEs, right? So that cost increase includes additional FTEs, which are 5 for the scrap program, or excuse me, sorry, 5 for the equipment operator apprentice program, right? The training coordinator definitely need to happen. The apprentice was to try to get people that had no CDL, no experience, come in and we train them and hopefully they stay, right? So it's the help. There are some administrative positions that we did add, and that was the safety and emergency coordinating position, the admin manager position, the data program specialist. Those were all added to provide support. We had an HR payroll specialist that we added because our number of drivers increased, so we needed to have more support for the front line, and then also trying to capture our information. So just to note that the average driver wage from 2019, right, prior to what you're seeing here, because 2020 was the first big salary market adjustment. The average driver wage went from $19.12 in 2020, it went to $21.02. Over this span that you're seeing, driver wages on average, because we implemented pay for work experience and education in 2021, 2022 for drivers. So driver wage has gone up $10 an hour, average. Make sure they average.
And that was in 2022, those were the numbers.
Yeah. And well, so I think the $10 is actually for 20, the jump would be all the way through 2024, right? So the average driver wage is now $29.21 in this year. All right, from 1912. See where I'm going with that? And the starting wage has increased $6 an hour. Starting wage is for somebody that comes in with 1 year of TDL experience. So we started paying for work experience so that we could recruit and retain people that had more CDL experience. And it really has paid off, but there's a price, right? So, and then looking at starting other considerations basically of increased costs will be, now we will have a $10,000 price tag per year with a 2% escalation for storing our roll-off containers as scrap containers. Now that we will be entering into agreement, which I'll ask you to adopt next month, or excuse me, next week, for the Bingham Creek Park Authority. We're going to have an interlocal with them so that we can pay for that space where we have containers. We've been lucky that we have not had to pay that over the years. Yeah. So that'll be a new cost. We have shared paving costs. The road going back to our south yard is, you've seen some of the pictures and you walked that facility and saw how dilapidated, decayed the asphalt is. So we will have a shared cost to have a new road going back there next year, the 72,000. In 2026, there will be a shared cost for paving the parking lot. That's land we own. We've already upgraded a big portion of that with cement. Thank you very much. There will be a shared cost going into 2026. So I wanted to make sure I gave a fee increase history for you. on the next page. And that is, as you know, 2023 we came in, or excuse me, that same page, thanks Renee. And we raised from $17 up to $19.50 over the years. You can see 2024. You can see that there's been a 3 to 4 year maximum, with time in between. As I mentioned, 2023, too long. It's all hindsight now, where we're at. There's no question. Just moving on, going back to the fund balance or cash balances that Zion's put before you. And this is if we have no increase going forward. And then the next page is the comparison for other municipalities and their sanitation or waste and recycling collection services. I think that board member Orr reached out and asked for this after the September meeting. I just sent it out, but I just wanted to make sure it's in your packet so you can see this. Yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna say, while we were going through, questions had come up about the trailer tier cost. Weight management, but, the comparison, 10-yard is $741 for the same time frame. 15-yard is $705, so.
I know when we were doing demo, you can get a big tank, at
30 yards.
Yeah, you can get a big one for about 400. So anyway, I know that.
So am I seeing this correctly? It says, like, Riverton is $13.
Yeah.
That's their monthly cost.
But the fee they charge, so I don't know cost, I'm telling you.
I call it-
General fund dollars.
They charge a trash to everything in their city. And then in addition, then they can, so it's somewhat subsidized. I think the biggest thing you'll notice on this chart is Trans-Jordan member. What's the difference in our tipping fee versus theirs?
We're twice as much.
So our tipping fees at Trans-Jordan is what kills us. That's why they can keep their prices lower, is because they're members of Trans-Jordan, we are not, and it kills us. But I don't know, there will be some changes coming with their changes also. They're gonna have to start shipping all that out of there. Gonna have to certainly start costing more money. But the only one I could see that's not a Trans-Jordan member that prices are substantially lower than us is Oak Valley. So I don't know how they can keep their prices so low, but they're definitely, they'd be $10 a month cheaper than us.
Looks like they have bi-weekly recycling.
Yeah, it's a different service level. Some of them have a lower fee that they charge. There's a different service level. Their dumping fees are different. Salt Lake City, just to talk about them, they include their green can. I want to make sure everyone understands that. They have 3 cans at that $33.20 per home per month. Yeah,
It's the
3
green
cans.
one.
Pardon?
They get the green one also. So what is our green can?
Our green can is currently $10.50. We're proposing, and in the tentative budget, it would be going up $1.50, and that is covered. With the analysis that David Icke did and looking at the numbers, that green subscription is paid for with the fee that we charge.
So our would be 37 if we combine all 3 cans.
Yeah, and would we be able to, yes, ma'am. If you look at just those numbers, yeah. One of the things about Salt Lake City Green is that every resident has a can. Ours is subscription, so there are, costs associated with some, if you want to call it.
Yeah, you have to go to new,
Yeah.
for sure. It drives us to come.
So that's why we do have a higher.
Makes sense.
So what you're seeing in the comparison is if we were to raise $550 a month. Yeah, obviously, if we went up to $650 and had 26, we'd still be right underneath Salt Lake City. And then looking at service level. So one of the things to point out is, to my knowledge, there's only us that has the landfill voucher. And then again, it's for additional waste that residents are willing to haul to the landfill themselves. Last year, I believe we were $92,000 cost, Again, that's included in the tipping fee. This year, we're gonna be roughly about 40,000, and that price has dropped because now we've reined in some abuse that was happening with those. So yeah, we'll have a smaller cost associated.
And those are basically $15, right? Not $15 for a truckload, and you can use your voucher for that, right?
Yeah, the Salt Lake Valley, I believe it's 15, and then, Trenchard, I think it's a little bit less.
No, they're 15 out there.
Are they 15 as well? Thank you. Oh, 15, there you go.
Gary's in the know with all.
I was there this morning, I was here.
Yeah. So any questions on this information so far? Going into the, what we have is the proposed budget, which could be the tentative, unless you request changes. If I may, this is going into looking at, revenues first to fourth. This is plugging in the 550 per home per month with revenues going in.
Which is scenario 2?
Scenario 3, I believe, is Zion. So it would be the option number 3 for Zion's information. Okay, thank you for coming so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And then one thing to note is all scenarios get us to $28 a month by 2027. No matter how you slice it. Again, depending on what you choose as options, would depend on what we need to adjust the staff, right? One of the things that I've been asking since, I think, June, when I first brought this information to you, as far as our cash balances, is that I've said if you have any interest in serving back recycling, that we survey residents, right? That would be, if you went bi-weekly, that would be the quote unquote largest cost savings of about $1.50. But my concern was if you start dropping the fee increase going forward, you saw that cash balance. It will take time to do anything. But in the past, we have surveyed residents, and even when we put in there, it would be $1.50 more per home per month for you to keep your weekly recycling. The majority, well over 2/3 of the district residents that keep it, even in the Magnet Kearns area, they were still above 2/3 of the residents that wanted to keep it. When I've gone out to each municipality, I'm hearing that there was no desire to cut services. I think what Magnet City's intent is to go out there and see if they can get the same service level as a small dollar, right? So I respect that and understand it. My hope is that we don't lose the economies of scale because it does help everyone.
Volume.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the bulk trailer would go up to, I've plugged in some numbers here. 240, that would cover some of the fee. We'll definitely go back and readjust that if you, with your direction, if that's what you choose to do. And then for the green waste, it's $25 a load to take large bulky green waste over to Diamond Tree. Now, that covers the tipping fee, but it wouldn't cover the total cost, right? So the green trailer has always been a reduced rate with the thought of trying to divert waste, again, away from the landfill. We're trying to save landfill space and reuse material. If you would like to see the true cost go up, we can certainly propose that or put it as part of the tentative budget. Right now, I'm hearing that we may need to come up with a couple different scenarios for you all, and we can do that.
I'd just like to see what the true cost, not anything we're subsidizing.
Okay.
Love it.
I still would say that I'm in support of this 6 or 650, whatever that first option was. I don't know how other people feel that for the budget. It just makes sense to me. I feel like in the past, we haven't raised rates sufficiently. We waited too long. And I think that's what happens in government because we know we're accountable to our residents. And so we're always hesitant to do that. But ultimately, we end up with bigger problems in the future. And I just feel like rather than kicking the can down the road and making a problem for a future board, let's address this now and fix it so that we can be in a stronger position for those who will be in these seats in the future.
I'm sure just because I've been on board for 7 years, I don't believe the board was kicking the can down the road. We've been, I think, receptive to anything that staff has brought forward. There was a time 2 or 3 years, I can't remember, shortly after Paul came on that we looked at things, I think we didn't expend, we looked at our budget differently. So instead of planning for 95, we bumped it to 98, so that allowed us to stretch our money out a little bit farther, just looking at creative ways instead of increasing rate. I think that's my perception of it, is that we continue to look at ways to not have to do it. I don't think anybody 4 years ago would have assumed that we would have had the type of increase that we've had either.
No,
I didn't.
You're right, that's fair. I'm not.
I don't
think 4 years have just been
crazy.
Yeah.
for anyone in business.
Yeah, it was opposite. We were at 98% expenditure
Went to
and then we looked at 94, I think, and that was too low, obviously. We learned. So bumping it up, but that's why going forward, I want to do cash projections based on spending 98% of the budget. And I think you need to include capital in that. And I think that's the kicker. That's the kicker right there, because that's cash right out the door immediately.
Well, and hopefully in the future, we won't have a crisis hit that makes everything nearly impossible to predict on a budget basis. So I'm comfortable with the selection, number 3, if that would, where we were. I keep getting those budget numbers.
Option number 2 at 650. Or
Was it one
I think
that
it
they
was
budgeted the number?
Yeah, she had said option 1, and that she then increased another
Yeah.
$50.
Oh, okay, go on forward.
Okay, so option 1.
So 2026 and 2050 and then
If you wanted to.
Okay, well, wait, I mentioned one where she was saying
Right,
150.
one.
Option
That was
one.
one of the newer
she
ones.
said that would get us,
That would give us
3
the
months.
90 days.
Excuse me.
And I
which
think
to me,
90
that's
days.
Yeah,
it's scary for me not having 6 months.
I'm with, that it stresses me out.
Yeah, like, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't have any more to lose.
And I totally respect that. One of the questions I want to ask as far as the proposed budget is that we have in here a new roll-off container that would be part of the trailer rental arsenal, so to speak. Is that something you would like me to take off the table, or do you want to just look at full costs for that? And what way that would like? So the
It's
roll.
a different type of trailer.
Correct. So it's a small, it's a 14-yard, and with this particular option, residents can put it into their house. With a trailer, it cannot go in a house because of the hook, the gooseneck that's on a trailer. It's too much of a safety issue. It goes onto their property. So this, this has been trying to address some of the concerns that
I
we're.
got some homes on hills that can't get traditional.
Are we have those trailers available, and it's the cost of placing them in homes, or is this something that we're incurring additional cost to purchasing?
We're subsidized.
It would be subsidized at the rate, other than I did bump it up to 170. So if you want me to look at true cost for that?
Oh, sorry, Sherry, you're asking, I think, we need to purchase new equipment.
No.
Yeah, and I agree with Erin. I just think we have to look at true cost, because back to Anna's point, I don't think we should be competing with the private market with government money either. I think that cities can look at code enforcement and things like that. We already offer a benefit to cities to help with those types of issues, that maybe a government safety net type of thing. But other than that, I think that the private market offers options.
And the only exception would be your canyon.
Yeah.
Yeah, the scrap stuff.
So I'll take that off the table.
I mean, bring it and give us the full amount of what it costs, yeah, and I'm okay with that, just bring it.
Would you set the table, the subsidy or providing it at all?
Providing that it'll.
I think it's fine to provide it.
Yeah.
I'm okay to provide it,
Me too.
and you said it's smaller,
Yeah.
so it'd be cheaper. So residents would have 2 options on depending on what their needs are. I would provide it, but at a minimum, either not subsidize it as much or just do it.
Especially if
Got
there's
it.
not any current capital outlay that we have to incur. That was my concern. Are we incurring capital outlay?
Or more drivers. Would it take more drivers?
It would take one SDE. But honestly, if we raise trailers up to what it fully costs, I anticipate that trailer.
Well, that
rental
fully
number-
cost should include the cost of that SDG.
Yeah. And we may not get as many rentals.
I'm sure you will.
So I don't know if we need to add an SDE, So anyway, yeah, I got the direction, come back with true cost. including
Can I
that.
ask a question about, in my mind, it just makes sense to, what are your actual needs? Increase the fee for that level of service. Don't incur debt unless you really need to for legitimate projects that are generational projects. So I don't, there's been some discussion of, I think that leasing is the best path, and that I don't quite understand, and maybe somebody needs to walk me through that. In Cottonwood Heights, and this is different, but all of our police cars, we do lease and we turn them over every 3 years. The whole point is they are sold to another department somewhere else around the country that buys them. And we don't have, there's a line item up there on maintenance, doesn't exist. We don't have a maintenance line item. And so, if there was a scenario where, and I'm not grasping, we would lease these things and it would get rid of the maintenance, but it sounded like it was leased to own. And I think if it was leased to own, I don't know if I'd be super comfortable with that. Because to me, that doesn't make a ton of sense. If we increase the fee, if you have the cash, pay cash for the truck. Now, if it was a program where we get it in, turn it over, and other municipalities are buying 3-year-old garbage trucks or something, and we have no maintenance, I would do that for sure. But I just want to make sure I'm understanding that correctly.
Well, I don't know how we could avoid maintenance at all. I mean, even if we were to lease and in the perfect world, we sold them.
The only reason why the lease is avoided in those scenarios are who you're buying them from. Those are warranted for 3 years, which is why the turnover is a 3-year turnover.
These
because-
have tired breaks.
But yeah,
Oh,
that's sure.
that-
Yeah. So our maintenance, or excuse me, our warranties are mainly a year. There are some that might be a little longer, but really, after that first year, then everything is under our belt.
Takes that long to get a truck going.
That's how they-
Let me ask this question. So do you feel like some of these issues that you brought up are going to impact the decision of what option we pick today?
Well, we just had this presentation earlier, and they're kind of giving us all these kind of financial options of how it would impact the bottom line. I get it. I'm just saying, unless I'm understanding it incorrectly, I would be in favor of that being increased and not. It seemed like we were kind of tying them together a little bit.
I think they were trying to get the number of days of cash up, and if we're not buying, I don't be that need.
I'm comfortable with 90 days. I'm fine with that. And so
Okay.
Pam, tell us which option will take us to 90 days and what fee, and let's see what people feel about that decision.
And I think that's not even on the list. She said to give us the 90 days, we needed to do.
It would be it'd be an
It
option
would,
for
it
it.
would be an option
Yeah.
1 plus, and that was the one, is that where, and then the $150.
Yeah, and then it came to 29 in 2027.
Yeah.
So it'd be an option 4, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Which would be in 2025, we go to $650, and then, excuse me, $26.
26.
And then in 27, we'd go to 27.
No,
No,
25 Hang on.
750.
25 and
Helen,
26. Helen, you have again.
Thank you.
2026 is 2750 and 2027 is 29.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that gets us.
How do you feel about that? Is this something that you want Pam to bring to us on Monday?
And I really want to make sure that every municipality speaks up, because, I mean, this is a
This is
long-term
a,
financial, and everything's going up, police,
Right.
fire.
Well, I'll full disclosure, Cameron will probably go out for a fee. When I first came on the board, we did also, even though we couldn't because we're a special service district, and I didn't understand all that. But just because I feel like it's my responsibility to make sure we're in line with what's going on in the industry. We have a lot of HOAs in our community that have private haulers in there, and things like that, so, I think that this district is run well. I think you and your team do a great job, has no reflection on any of that. This hasn't had a reflection on whether or not I think we have to make sure we're staying in the ballpark. And and actually, if I did it from the work from board part, I look at it and think, I don't care. It just validates that we're doing a good job. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like, no, that's the true cost that are associated with what's going on here. So it enables me to validate that with my community.
Are there others, are going to go for?
I think we mentioned it.
Magna City will,
I think
and
they
then
were bringing it
Heritage.
anyway. They're
Yeah.
looking at that for all their services right now. They're.
Because they're a new city.
Yeah, they're a new city
And
and
they
they're
go-
looking at all of those things right now and I don't blame them. I would as well if I were there.
And I think even it's policy internally at our city, anything that we're like lawn mowing, kind of those kind of services, we're always checking that every few years to make sure we're staying in line with what, do we bring this in-house, do we keep this out, those kind of things. So nothing directed anything at this organization, it's 100% to make sure we do that.
Because we all in here wear two hats.
Yeah.
We represent Warford and we represent the city and then walk that line. And I don't have a problem doing both.
So I was
RFPs and
sorry, felt like County's in a weird position because, as you know, we had a House bill passed that is shrinking our unincorporated areas and that service areas. We will be going from 12,000 people in an unincorporated county by the end of 2026. Yeah, and so I don't know what that means for us long term and for the next 2 years. That would yeah.
The county, right?
For the county. Yeah. So what we will be serving from Woodford, but some of our facilities is 1,200 people. So you're gonna see some of our costs kind of going down, won't be serving as many, because those will actually be absorbed into some of your cities. And where your members stay in Woodford, where they're not members, they won't. I doubt that they will stay. So that's a really good, and the problem is, how does that work? So we're working through that because technically they're still in the boundaries because they're part of Woodford.
Correct.
And so I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah.
They're gonna be incorporated into Sandy, a little bit into Concord Heights,
Mhm.
but those big little islands you got over there, those will all come.
And the question is, the way special districts work, they're still in the boundaries, so Sandy doesn't automatically get to give them services. So they're gonna have to work that out, somehow, figure that out. That's not an automatic thing. Sandy can't say, well, you're now in Sandy, we're gonna take the services away, we're gonna provide them. Because they're actually part of the boundaries and part of that.
But then they'll be paying all of those Sandy taxes. I'm sure those residents will want, but not,
It's not pretty.
yeah.
They're gonna have to figure that out.
And there's a process, there's a legal process.
There is.
City to withdraw.
And the city's gonna have to do that with each of those entities, if that's what they're gonna do.
And now that we're a special district, you have the authority to say yea or nay, whereas before it was under Salt County.
Yeah.
So glad now.
No,
I can't think of. I mean, is there anybody under the sun? I don't want you to understand where we're coming from my position, because again, we're changing drastically right now. We will affect Woodford.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Other board business. Okay. Requested items for the next board meeting, adopted the agreement with the Bingham Creek Port Authority 2024 third quarter financial report, which ought to be quite interesting. Tentative adoption of the 25 budget and fee increase, confirm the date and public hearing. And that is scheduled for November 18th. So hope everybody gets that on the calendar. And then again, we'll have Pam's report.
And then, Madam Chair, I did receive back the interlocal from Salt Lake County for us to continue servicing with their county facilities, including cost increase or price increase going forward. And so I will have Rachel look over it. Right now, everything looks amenable, but I do want to have legal redo it when she gets back into town, so I'll have that up for your adoption.
Okay.
Which one is the public hearing usually for these?
It just depends, with this large of a, with this high of a fee
We might
increase,
have
we
someone.
might have some people come. In the past, there's been maybe one when we've done a fee increase. None in the.
We never had. No fun at all. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
These conversations, there's a really sharp efficiency and great idea.
Probably.
I think you
Pam, thank you.
You and all you got to do all of
I know.
it.
So let's
Red,
just
yeah.
answer.
Red.